Okay, hello everybody, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Declan Carolyn, and I'm co-chair of ECR Community, and it's with great pleasure that my role here today is to launch our webinar that looks at the latest publication which we have from ECR Community. It was released on January 18th, and it is a global review of circular economy case studies from the retail and CPG sector. All I'm going to do today is just set up who ECR Community are, our focus areas, and then introduce our panelists. I think we've got a really good webinar today. Let me talk a little bit about ECR Community. As most of you know, we are the support group for ECR nationals in 25 countries across the world. In the last few years, each year we've had a focus area. In 2020, our focus area was on category management, and we released the category management yesterday, today, and tomorrow, an ECR Community review of current practices in category management, and supported it by 5 webinars. And this year we'll launch a global category management association. Last year, our focus area was the circular economy, and we've had 2 publications which have arisen. The first was a publication of packaging guidelines for recycling, which was launched with the World Packaging Organization and supported by global webinars last year within the ECR Community. And the second was this publication, the ECR Community Circular Economy Case Studies in Retail and CPG Sector, which we are going to have today's webinar, plus 3 more webinars during the year, in order to bring some of the case studies to life. The review is 100 pages, comprising of 18 case studies and 6 inside articles. So it's packed full of information, and it's a long read. And we find that supporting the publication with webinars where the participants present some of the work which they submitted works very well. So this year, our focus area in ECR Community is going to be sustainability. And we're going to take a slightly different approach this year. We're going to collect, share, and promote the sustainability initiatives and projects from all ECR nationals to create a repository of knowledge. And this approach, I suppose, is sharing and learning initiatives that are working in countries across the world, all based on the topic of sustainability. And there isn't a country in the world where sustainability isn't one of the highest priority items and hot topics within the retail and CPG sector. So for today, I'd like to introduce each of our panelists. And I suppose I'm going to start by, asking each panelist in turn to appear, perhaps to consider one question in terms of what they would like retailers and manufacturers to get out of today's webinar. So let me first introduce Lenneke Schils from GfK. And Lenneke, I'd like to thank GfK and yourself for your support in sponsoring this publication. It's been really appreciated, and everyone in the ECR Community is delighted to have you on board. How are you, and what would you like retailers and manufacturers to get out of today?
Hi, and obviously it's been our pleasure to support this really important publication, and I would say one of the recurring topics we're talking about for the past few years, actually. I have been really good, thanks for asking. And to answer really your question, what I would really like the listeners to take away from today is the awareness that well before 2030, green consumers could reach up to half of the global population. So that means a huge business imperative for circular economy. However, I would say, really not lose track of this unprecedented momentum we have right now, also the realization that we should not lose sight of what really drives and incentivizes consumers on a more shorter term in these, I would say, hundreds of micro decisions they have to take every single day in their daily lives, in order to really understand what might impede them as well from really structurally moving from caring to doing. And I'm really looking forward to talk about this in a bit. Thanks.
That's absolutely fascinating, Lenneke. Thanks. We look forward to hearing from you in about 10 minutes or so. Let me introduce who's going to be our second presenter from a company today, and it is Fernando Ventura from the retailer Jerónimo Martins. Hello, Fernando. How are you?
Hello, hello, Declan. Thank you. Good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to be here today, sharing not only some of our experiences, but also our point of view. Which I would say that from our experience, circular economy is more and more a relevant topic for retailers, specifically for food retailers, which is our main business for the Jerónimo Martins Group. And it's important, I think, for us when we are looking for circular economy solutions, the way that we study, the way that we look at consumers' behaviors, that can give us many tips to develop those solutions. And also it can trigger consumers' behaviors changes, which of course are critical for the success of the solutions that we are developing.
Okay, that's Fernando. Thanks for that, and we'll see you shortly. And let me stage our third presenter today, who's going to represent the manufacturing sector, and it is Yana Kreybel of the Cameleon Group. Hello, Yana, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Really nice to be here. So I'm just going to briefly to present the company. So we are a French manufacturer of point of sales marketing solutions. We design, manufacture, and install these solutions in point of sales. So we are working both with retailers and brands in France and in Europe. And we, as a group, are committed to CSR and to sustainable and circular principles since 2015 within our group. And we try nowadays more and more to put these principles in practice with our clients' projects. And what we really would like to focus on and present to you is, so the solutions exist and some of the companies are really, really successful in putting them into practice. And for those of the companies, both on manufacturers and retailer sides and brand sides, it's sometimes difficult to know where to start. And I think that's important to know that the solutions exist and how to approach them with their suppliers, with their clients, and with their business partners. So I think this is also something that's important to take away from this study and from this webinar today.
That's a great message, Yana. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to hearing from that later on. Let me welcome on stage then Shay McGann, and Shay is Sustainability Lead for ECR Community. If we could have a virtual round of applause, I think now is the time to have the virtual round of applause, because Shay has led this initiative from the beginning to the publication, and a lot of the work in terms of sourcing and working with the retailers and suppliers and the contribution of the insight articles has all been supported by Shay, and indeed Shay has contributed hugely to it. There are some really interesting output from this publication, particularly the ECR Community Circular Economy Framework, and I suppose to tell us all about the publication in a little bit more detail and to go through it. Shay, well done, thanks, and handing over to you.
Thank you, Declan. It's really great to be here, finally launching this review of global circular economy case studies in the retail and CPG sector. And as Declan said, I've been responsible for doing all the coordination work in the background, but it's been a real privilege to see the level of engagement from our ECR nationals and their companies in helping us bring this review together. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the review and explain how it came about, the methodology we used, and also then how just best to navigate the review, because as Declan said, it's 100+ pages and there's lots of really good content in there. So just in terms of our agenda today, as I said, the purpose of this webinar is to set the context for this review. I'll give an overview. Lenneke will then look at the consumer imperative, and then we are going to go to an informal panel discussion on the why and the how companies should be implementing circular practices within their business. So Lenneke will join the panel along with Fernando Ventura and Yana, who you've just met, and then we'll also leave some time for questions at the end. So feel free to submit those in the chat either now or at any time during the webinar. So the objectives of this review. So we had 4 main objectives. The first was to provide a snapshot of global circular economy case studies in the retail and CPG sector to really better understand where retailers and manufacturers are on this journey at a global level. So not just maybe the countries where you hear lots of case studies from, really getting a cross section of what the ECR member countries are doing. The second was to provide real examples of circular projects to ECR members, so those working in sustainability, strategy, cost savings, innovation, who are really kind of on the ground trying to implement these circular solutions within their business. Then to show the importance of collaboration, so with the various partners, as Yana alluded to there, you can't do circular economy projects within your own 4 walls. You have to reach out to your stakeholders. So if you're a retailer, you need to work with your suppliers or your customers, your business partners to really to have a truly successful circular project. And then finally, and the reason I suppose ECR Community has taken a lead in this space is that we really feel the circular economy demonstrates the ECR model of promoting collaboration and new ways of working between retailers and manufacturers. So I just wanted to show you, I suppose, all of the various people that have been involved in this review. It's been a really good group to work with, and I suppose it started out as myself and a number of the ECR nationals, so France, Austria, Italy. We were then joined by Colombia and Ireland, and then we've also had a number of, I suppose, experts in various topics of the circular economy. So whether that be packaging or kind of process solutions or food waste, we had a number of experts, I suppose, validate the approach we were taking. So as you can see, a really good cross section of companies to make this a real global review. So we had input from Australia and Colombia and lots of European countries as well. So thanks to all of my colleagues. It's been really good to work with you on this. So then in terms of the companies included in the review, you can see all the logos here. So a good mixture of retailers, brands, and then also companies where circular principles are really at the core of what they do. And then up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a graph which shows the countries where the case studies came from. So you'll see it's generally Europe predominant, countries from Europe, which was really, I suppose, the result of the work that ECR nationals who were involved with this review. They were extra active at getting their members to submit case studies. And while there are 18 case studies in the review, we did have over 40 submissions. So really good engagement, and if we were to do this again, we would hope to reach some of our other maybe non-Europe members and include some of their case studies. So then to look at the ECR framework we developed, which you can see here. So there are 5 key areas that we identified as being key for retailers and manufacturers when it comes to the circular economy. So they are circular packaging, circular product design, food waste, waste management, and circular platforms. And I think most of them are self-explanatory. Perhaps the circular platforms category that came about because there are a lot of technology and digital solution and tools and behavioral change projects that are really important to drive the circular economy in businesses. So they're all in that category. And then the colours are flow through the review. So if you're looking for packaging case studies, you'll be able to very quickly find them in the review. It's all the sections in blue, and the same for the others. And then just another note here. I suppose we've tried to define what type of projects fit in under each of these categories. And although we may not have an example case study of all, this is ideally what we'd like to get to in future years. So we'll be able to track the level of maturity as time goes on. So then just to give you some insight on how the framework was designed. So firstly, we did a review of existing global circular economy frameworks. So obviously the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Circular Economy, the World Economic Forum platform for accelerating the circular economy, and then the 10R framework, so which is built out from the reduce, reuse, recycle principle. They were all looked at and assessed. We then did an analysis of key topics for the sector, and from that it was really clear that like packaging, food waste, and waste management were the key focus areas for retailers and manufacturers. And then finally, I suppose we had a commitment to make sure that the framework was inclusive for all ECR members, and that was really regardless of the size of the company or where it was operating within the world. I think there has to be a recognition that there are some countries that are much further ahead on this topic than others. And then the same with companies as well. There are big companies with lots of resources to put into this, and others that don't have the same level of resources, but can still be quite innovative if there are practical examples they can follow. Then in terms of the selection methodology and how we actually chose the case studies, so we built this framework and it was based off the EU circular economy indicators and also one of the BS circular economy standards. So there was 3 stages. The first was the project needed to demonstrate that it supported the transition to a circular economy by better managing resources, so energy, water, materials, and to reduce waste. And then that it had an element of behavioural change. So again, like raising awareness of this topic within the sector is hugely important, particularly with like consumers, but also employees, suppliers, business partners, anyone else that you work with. Stage 2 then was that the project had to demonstrate at least one of the following. So collaboration, really important. We're going to talk about that in the discussion. Eco-innovation and system thinking. And then stage 3, obviously ECR supports both retailers and manufacturers, so we wanted to get a really good balance between the two, so and to showcase all as many countries as we could and the various topics. So the format of this review, again, it's structured in terms of the ECR framework, so the 5 areas. And then there's 2 main sections, the insight section, so 6 insight articles, which I suppose they come from circular economy experts and demonstrate the latest trends, new ways of collaborating, new processes and formats, all to help companies transition to a circular economy. And then the action section is obviously all the case studies, and they're all presented in a consistent format. So they all follow this format, which you can see here. So the first page deals with the challenge. Then we have the second page is the solution. And we ask lots of leading questions just to really help companies structure their case studies in the same format. Then we went into lessons learned, then what's next for the project. And then on the final page, we I suppose took a step back and asked companies where they saw the circular economy fitting within their business. And then there's just some company background as well, just in case you don't recognize the brands, just to give you an overview of the size of the company and where they're operating and all of that. And then finally, next steps. So as Declan mentioned at the start, we're going to do a webinar series to help disseminate this review as well. We've 3 webinars scheduled. So the first will be towards the end of March, and that will focus on the circular packaging and circular product design case studies. We'll have a second one in May, so that will look at waste management innovation and food waste. And then our final one on circular platforms will be in September. So to, I suppose, register for those, or just keep an eye on our LinkedIn page is probably the best place. But we'll also be sharing all this information with our ECR nationals, and you'll be able to get it from them as well. And our hashtag there is ECR Circular Economy as well. So I hope that gives you a good oversight of the review. Again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Or I'll also be available for questions at the end. So with that, I'll hand over to Lenneke to take us through the consumer imperative.
Yeah, let me just quickly share my screen. So also on my behalf, thanks everyone for joining today, and I'm really looking forward to kind of, I would say, setting the scene and channeling the consumer voice a bit in the next 10 minutes or so, and really talking about how sustainable behaviors in fast-moving consumer goods are moving into the mainstream. And for this, we really have to look at how consumer demand is really the ultimate measure of behavior change. And luckily, we have some evidence to really substantiate these big behavioral trends via our Who Cares Who Does report, which we have been conducting over the past 3 years, where we really measure how changing attitudes towards environmental concerns and willingness to act is really reconfiguring the marketplace. And based on this premise, there is, I would say, 5 main points I would like to talk to you about today. And the first being that eco-action is truly accelerating, and that packaging is still very much at the forefront of this change. That having said, there is also still a quite sizable gap between consumers that are really willing and wanting to take action and those that are really already following through. And this gap really needs to be mended for, I would say, the circular economy to really reach its full potential size. And that takes us really about like who's going to take the lead in effectuating this change. And circular business models are really quite well set for this, as long as these environmental benefits are communicated alongside, I would say, more personal consumer benefits. And I'm really happy to share a few clues as to how to achieve this, of course. So first, eco-acceleration. We really have witnessed a sentiment shift around sustainability, gearing towards more circular business models. And this can not only be seen in the sheer number of consumers that are really interested in altering their behaviors in a green way, but also really in the nature of change they would want to see. Now, over the past, we have been identifying shoppers across the globe in more than 26 markets that show a really high concern about environmental issues, mainly climate change and plastic waste, and that are also really making the most of actions to reduce their own waste and footprints. And moreover, they really feel intrinsically responsible to make this difference, and they are also quite influential on the topic towards others. So this group we have entitled Eco-Actives, and they have been growing over the past years from when we started only already 15% to a sheer 22% in the most recent year. So that is already a quite sizable increase. And in Europe, it's even up to 28% at this moment. So if we would project this trend into the nearby future, we could expect as soon as by 2029 that on average across the globe, 1 in every 2 shoppers will actually be eco-active if this growth trend continues. Now, truth be told, this is also a story of 2 speeds, where you can really see in high GDP countries, majority can already be reached within as fast as 4 years. And in low GDP countries, this might take up to 14 years. And obviously, the current economic circumstances are likely to prolong this duality. But the fact that we are growing into a situation where there are more consumers that are really considering the environment in making purchases than there are not doing so, means that there is a huge business imperative, only because of the sheer value they represent, but also because of obviously their behaviors will really impact the consumer goods landscape. And there is opportunities, but also risks. So just to highlight an example, when we look at, for example, carbonated soft drinks, this is a category that has really been under trading with eco-actives. And if we would also here really project this trend that we're seeing of growth of eco-actives and their pertinent behaviors, then we could predict already an annual loss of 700 million euros in only 4 countries that we are taking here in this example: Belgium, Great Britain, Germany, Spain, on a year-on-year loss for this category if we fail to recruit these eco-actives. So the business imperative definitely is there. And this category impact, I can further evidence a bit what happens when shoppers really are following through. So looking at Germany in this instance, which is, I would say, the world's leading market when it comes to the amount of green consumers, or eco-actives in this case, we see that the group of eco-actives is really huge. And 2 out of 3, 65% of them always says they are trying to avoid buying drinks in plastic. Now, looking at what is actually being bought, we can see the real big impact of these behaviors on category sales, because where in 2020, 87% of the category value of carbonated soft drinks would be sold in plastic. Within only 1 year, this is already down to 81%. So it's really not only causing an opportunity, but also sometimes landslides in the configuration of categories. So packaging still is very much at the forefront of this. Consumer interest in these eco-friendly behaviors have for a few years been really focusing on minimizing plastic waste, but because of the COVID crisis, it's really also turning more into the, I would say, even bigger topic of climate change. And this means they're interested also turning into other areas. So if we use these eco-actives also as sort of predictors of where eco-activity is going, we can really see it's extending into every part of their lifestyle. So it's buying local, looking for carbon neutrality, really consciously reading labels, also checking for recycling information, and checking to see whether products are really sustainably sourced. Now, many will try to reduce their footprint, and also here we see that packaging still is really a major focal point. Looking at what most shoppers are intending to increase most in the next year, we can still see it's really centered around packaging, refillables, reusables, or buying sustainable packaging altogether. So for the, I would say, the average population, but also for the eco-actives. So this is a really good clue already as to where the circular economy can point towards. And we should also not underestimate the power of packaging as a communication vehicle, because when we asked shoppers what kind of forces were really shaping their behavior regarding the environment and society, you could really see media as playing a big role here, social media, traditional media, but also product packaging was mentioned nearly as much, and even for the eco-actives, this came out on top. So they really turned to product packaging as a driving force for change and to understand what decisions they need to take. However, looking again at packaging as kind of like the tip of the iceberg of everything that's going on in the sustainability landscape, there is still a big value action gap. So that means there is unfulfilled green intentions. There's lots of green consumers that want to play a part in a sustainable future but don't really know how to, or they feel it might be too difficult. But we also seeing that brands that can help them buy as they really want can tap into real significant spending power. So to evidence this gap a bit, 65% actually say they want to buy environmental friendly packaging, but only 29% really regularly succeeds. So this is a huge gap of people, roughly 1/3 of the population, that is kind of sitting in, I would say, a green waiting room and not following through. And if we look at what is holding them back, we can see that the major barrier here is affordability. 53% of global consumers really say that they feel sustainable alternatives are too expensive. So it's really about shifting perceived value. And then second barrier is findability. It's recognition of brands, of products, and in-store distractions. 37%, for example, say that they get distracted by other things when they're in the supermarket. So it's also about communicating really clearly and powerfully and making sustainable choices really apparent. And then there's a functionality issue, with roughly 1 in 3 really stating that they don't believe these greener alternatives are equally good at fulfilling the job. So product effectiveness is also something to keep in mind. And it's also quite foretelling that 2 in 10 people really believe that the individual is most set to make a difference, and actually 4 in 10 believe manufacturers have more power to really make a difference when it comes to limiting the damage to the environment. So this really showcases the importance of brands operating circular business models to work with their consumers to reduce collectively environmental footprint. Because brand recognition is lagging, there's more consumers that cannot name any brand at this moment, not one at all that is doing a good job versus those that can. But at the other hand, the vast majority has actually stopped buying products and services because of a negative impact, or have switched to alternatives with a positive impact. So doing a good job will be rewarded. So it's all about making reciprocal action to recognize customers rather as partners rather than endpoint consumers. And this really is not a game of only brands and consumers, but a multi-stakeholder affair, obviously. Now, this comes to my conclusion on why we should triple the benefit. Because circular business surely brings a double environmental benefit, reducing not only the amount of landfill from consumers, but also limiting the necessary amount of raw materials needed to manufacture products. But to truly encourage consumers to be partners in this circular economy, the benefit needs to be tripled. So let me explain what needs to be done to really take a next step and empower consumers. Because even though everyone might recognize the need to take action, and skepticism is really on the decline, different consumers also are finding it increasingly difficult to take corresponding action. It depends a bit on where they are along, I would say, the green maturity curve. So if we look at eco-dismissers, so those shoppers that are not really into the subject and also not letting it play a part in their decisions, they do indeed look to save energy, save water, save food waste, or save packaging from a more economic perspective, because they also want to save money. So tapping into a sense of affordability, or I would say a price value for money, can really, I would say, remove some barriers for them to also have them move into more greener behaviors. And I think the Too Good To Go app is a really good example of how to achieve this. The eco-considerers, the ones that experience this value action gap the most, they are looking for refills, how-to instructions, recycling, and incentives. But it really needs to be made easy for them because they are not willing to put too much effort into at this moment. And then finally, the eco-actives, the benefit for this group that is already applying it so widely into their own lifestyle, it's more about rewarding them and tapping into this sense of reward and making them utilize their behaviors really as a badge of honor and influencing and showcasing how they are actually really eco-active in every sense. So bearing this in mind, I think you might be very well set for success here. So I think that is the end of my bit, and I'm looking forward to getting some of your questions later on. Thanks.
Thanks, Lenneke. That was really interesting. Fascinating to think how quickly it's all going to accelerate, but even from a couple of years ago, I suppose we're already seeing a huge change. So a really exciting space to watch. And on that note, I'm going to bring Lenneke back, and also our other two panelists, Fernando and your cameras are there, yeah. And Yana from the Cameleon Group, to have a I suppose a good and rich conversation around how and why companies need to transition to a circular economy and adopt more circular practices within their business. And I suppose I'd like to structure the panel discussion in three main areas. The first is kind of maybe a slightly more the theoretical discussion, because often the circular economy can be quite theoretical. Like where does it fit within their business? Are companies actually supposed to have circular projects, or do they just apply circular principles to all their sustainability projects? Then I'd like to look at the collaboration aspect, because as we've said, it's really important. You can't do these types of projects without working with your stakeholders. And then I think we'll look. The third topic is really the challenges. This isn't easy. It's a journey, and it's really only starting. So to get your insight on what some of the big challenges you're seeing. So I might start with you, Fernando, and you might just introduce yourself, and Jerónimo Martins. You obviously have 3 case studies in the review, which is great. And then I suppose my first question to you would be, you obviously have a sustainability strategy. Where does the circular economy fit in that, and everything that goes with that?
Yes, okay. So just to give an overview, what is Jerónimo Martins? So Jerónimo Martins is an international food distributor company. This year we are celebrating 230 years. We have operations in Portugal, of course, where the company was born, but presently also in Poland and in Colombia. So going directly to your question, of course, circular economy projects that we developed are under our a wider perspective in terms of sustainability commitments or sustainability strategy. And in fact, it's a priority. So aside with fighting climate change and protecting biodiversity, circular economy, it's perhaps one of the 3 priorities that we set in our environmental policy. And why? I think there are 2 different perspectives that complement each other. And in fact, it's the reason for us to develop more and more circular solutions. So from an environmental perspective, we look at these at resources. So when we are looking at resources, we know that resources are finite. Some of them are not as renewable as we would like them to be. So we continue these linear models. So this is the environmental perspective, but also from a business perspective, there are some risks, and the Lenneke I had reinforced this. So there is a risk for some product categories that they change, or the consumption will change in the future, but also some risks when we look at the sources of the ingredients, when we look at the supply chain, when we look at the way that some of the materials can be more or less circular. So, and when we combine those two perspectives, we can clearly say that there is a huge opportunity for food retailers to develop more and more circular solutions.
Brilliant, thanks, Fernando. I think you've covered some of the risks and the challenges that companies are going to face there as well. And then I might come to you, Yana. You're obviously developing circular economy solutions for retailers and CPG companies. And I suppose, how do you convince your clients of the benefits of transitioning to a circular practices? And you might give us an insight into what are the types of projects you're helping your clients with.
Yeah. So we work with brands and retailers for their point of sales marketing solutions, meaning that we manufacture the tools, and we also have the division that would work for the strategic approach of their marketing operations. And so these displays, the stands, they can be made out of different materials. And for Cameleon Group, we have been implementing the principles of sustainability and circular economy since a couple of years already in our own company for our own production and manufacture. And with the evolving market, with the evolving practices, we got certified as well by EcoPropie, which is a French association that provides a calculator to measure the CO2 impact of marketing operations. So we position ourselves as a consulting agency for the brands and for the retailers to help them measure the impact of their marketing projects. So there are different the demand of a more circular or sustainable project can come either from the client, because they have this imperative of wanting to go more circular, wanting to go more green, or it can also be whenever Cameleon Group would receive a demand from a client for a new marketing operation. We can analyze the impact of the marketing solutions they previously deployed and advise them on a greener solution or more circular solution. And we develop these products, we develop this solution as the case study that's in the report with the green bag. And we try to lean towards a perfectly circular solution, even if nowadays it's quite complicated to be perfectly circular. So whenever it's impossible to be really circular on a certain project, we also try to, as much as possible, advise our client on how to be more sustainable. Whenever their marketing operations can't be recycled, they can be recycled to make a new project, a new product. They can be probably reused at a lesser scale, but also to make them last longer. So we have solutions. We can't say to our clients, we are going to act on this project and make it perfectly circular from the start. Maybe this is like too much of a commitment, but we can offer solutions to make your projects greener.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? Like the sustainability is nearly how you get on the journey, and like circularity is like this perfect end goal. And there's everything in the middle, which is it'll be really interesting to see how these projects develop. But it's great that companies like yourselves are started out doing one thing, and then you've seen that opportunity, and already you were saying 20% of your business is in this space. So it's really good, because companies will need to work with partners to implement a lot of these solutions. They won't be core to their own business models, so they'll have to introduce partners in lots of areas. And then I suppose for my second area is the collaboration piece, which is really important. I think there's been a real shift in terms of how I suppose society is talking about this, and the business world. I think before it was very much like, are your own operations in order? But now it's shifted. Now it's like, well, when companies are writing tenders, they're asking their suppliers, how can you help us meet our sustainability goals? It's kind of nuanced, but it's a completely different question. It's no longer about just your operations. It's like, how can you influence your wider sphere, what your suppliers are doing, what your customers are doing. And Fernando, I know we spoke earlier about, I suppose, just the challenge around this. Like if you were to take your suppliers and your customers, engaging with them is a huge task. So I'd be really interested to hear about how you're doing this and approaching it.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So we deal with thousands of suppliers in all the countries where we have operations. Of course, private brand and perishable suppliers have a different role in terms of approach and in terms of influence, because we work with them in a daily basis by developing not only products, but the way that we want to deliver, for instance, perishables, and the importance to make them safe and have an efficient supply chain. But this also gives us an extra responsibility. And how do we do that? So it's important to be clear about the way that we want, about the goals, about the targets that we want to reach. And for instance, for packaging, we start redesigning packaging following environmental criteria. So we call it our eco-design program for packaging more than 10 years ago. But that was not a very formal process in terms of communication internally also, but especially to our suppliers. So what we did a few years ago is to improve this. We have to be very clear in terms of criteria, what we want for packaging and why. And this engagement is multiplying the number of projects that we are delivering every year. And at the beginning, we were pushing these solutions, but now suppliers are also proposing solutions by their own, so they don't need, in fact, many of the times to identify more circular solutions. So they come to us and they present the solutions. They just need approval. And if it's in line with our commitments and our targets and also our criteria, of course, this is quite easy to get the approval. So this is one of the examples. Of course, this is a quite complex process. For some solutions, we also have to deal with the investment aspects, because some of the solutions, in fact, need investments that need to be made by our suppliers. And in some cases, some of the solutions have to be delayed, because there is a right time for them to make those investments. And there's the complexity of this approach is related with this. We have to balance many different criteria, many different solutions, because we are talking about frozen food, but also other food products, perishables, non-food products, different dimensions also. So very small producers, from very small producers to quite big international companies and brands, we have them all in our supply chain. But nevertheless, this challenge, we are in fact delivering more and more circular economy solutions by involving them and by being more clear in terms of what we want.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, the whole supply chain, and the big, I suppose the big supplier engagement programs. Some of the big corporates are starting to launch, and already we see the trickle down effect for that second tier of suppliers who are now having to start their sustainability journey because they've been asked by their clients. So it's like a tidal wave is coming. We had a couple of questions in the chat. So one that we were actually going to come to as part of challenges. So I'll put this to you, Lenneke. It's from Claire Labras, and it's how to deal with inflation with the circular economy when supplier costs are under pressure and consumer purchasing power is challenged.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and a question that is really on all our minds. We already pre-discussed, obviously, that we're going to address this as well. So whereas this is ridden with insecurities at the moment, I think the high unprecedented levels of inflation will not mean anything for, I would say, shopper willingness to act at all. However, it will highly affect their ability to do so, quite frankly. As I evidenced before, was already a bit of a tale of two speeds, differentiating countries. And it also within countries, you can really see when we look at who at this moment are really eco-actives and the ones that are really following up with their purchasing power, it is the more affluent households that are doing so. So we can only imagine when inflation comes higher and higher, this puts pressure on purchasing power even more so, and driving the considerers, the dismissers, even a little bit backwards. So this is of major concern, and I do think in essence, obviously, circular economy solutions would be quite fit here to overcome these barriers of affordability and perceived value, because a lot of times you would expect reusing, reutilizing, etc., to really suppress like the total cost of products. However, at this moment, we also know that that is not the case yet. So I think programs such as, we see this a lot in fashion, where you get like credit for bringing back old clothes, and then you can buy it to repurchase new clothes, or your old clothes are turned into something else. I would say these kind of projects are all quite set to endure. I would say this moment in time with high inflation, but I think retailers especially have to really reconsider, like, how can you make it visible on the shop floor where products can be found, how people can contribute in this solution easily without having to go through great lengths of efforts every time. And also the greener products have to be more expensive, but there is a quite negative connotation. We've saw this. It's the main barrier to being green. It's affordability. So inflation will surely put this in a squeeze. Yeah. So really curious to see where the results of this year will bring us. Yeah.
Thanks, Lenneke. I think your point about making it easy is really important. I think some of the brands that I've seen, that, you know, when you go into the supermarket and they literally have it really nicely all over their packaging, and I know this is maybe a simplified example, not everyone can do this, but you pick it up and you can tell their sustainability credentials on the packaging is a really nice way to make it easy for consumers. I'm really conscious of time. We've only 2 minutes left. We had a final question about can we use circular packaging as a good marketing tool. And I think my comment there about putting it on the packaging is I suppose speaks to that. Yana is communications manager at the Cameleon Group. I don't know if you've any final comments on that and how you do that with the service you provide.
Yeah, so it's not only about communicating maybe on the packaging itself, saying that we have this certification or this label. It's also important for the brands to make their marketing operations as sustainable as possible. And it's important to know that the solutions exist and that you can change the way that you communicate as well. And the packaging, it's a really great communications tool. So you can also have everything you do, you can make it visible to your customers and also make them aware that you are putting this solution into practice. And this contributes to your brand image and also makes your action rewardable in the eyes of the consumers. So yeah, I think that's a great tool, and that's a tool that you already have. So just about adding the right amount at the right time of the right communication to it.
Yeah, I think there'll be some really interesting stuff done in this space as it becomes more mainstream. But unfortunately, we have to finish. Thank you all for joining the panel discussion. I think it was really interesting, and it's a really good way to, I suppose, a bit more engaging sometimes than presentations. Yeah, so thank you to everyone that joined. As I said, there'll be 3 more webinars, and the purpose of those webinars will be to get into the real detail of the case studies, and we'll have the companies present those in more detail, which would be really interesting. So again, watch out for those registration links on our LinkedIn page. And thank you all for joining. Particular thank you to Fernando, Lenneke and Yana for joining today.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.